Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome to another Chat with the Expert episode of Modern Leadership. It is so great to be with you this week, and I am so excited for this episode. I promise something unique and different. A little backstory. In my first year of college, a group of friends found ourselves late one Saturday night at an old movie theater that had been converted for a hypnotist show. One of my close friends was selected as a participant, and I laughed until my jaw hurt as he did some very uncharacteristic things for him. I loved it, had a blast, but I always secretly wondered, how real is this? How is this done? Well, today, let's find out. Let me welcome Jason Linett. Jason, like other successful entrepreneurial stories, built a $1 million brand in a few short years. The unique difference? He did it as a hypnotist. Jason has hypnotized more than 250,000 people by using the principles of rapport and modeling to track what other top business performers do differently. He created his own successful brand. Now he travels the world offering hypnotic-success coaching, showing people how to use the principles and strategies of work smart to grow their business. And today he is our modern leadership guest expert. Jason, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Now that's an introduction. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited. I think what you do and what you've done is awesome in two regards. I love this idea of hypnosis. I've always been fascinated by it, but you're also a business leader. You've also built a very successful entrepreneurial brand, and that's what we talk about on this show. So this is two things I'm incredibly interested in. But before we jump into all of that, give us a little backstory. Who are you on a personal level?
Well, what I'd share is your entry point into it is very similar to mine, that I was in college, and during what they called the Welcome Week, they had a hypnotist come on campus and do one of those programs. Now, my version of the audience was a little different, I think, than yours, because again, it was my friends that were up there, but at that time, I was following a career path to work in management in professional theater. And the hypnotist didn't know this, but he pulled up mostly my friends who were mostly actors at the time. Remember that phrase, at the time, because I'm watching this going, my friends really aren't that great of actors. And I say at the time because the ones I'm referring to are not acting anymore. And they're genuine. They're really in the moment. I'm going, okay, wow, this stuff is real. So I just became ravenous to learn as much as I could. And that became the game of balancing days off with taking classes and, time off from the job, going off to take trainings and get, professional certifications. And over time, realizing that the part-time career was taking over and I was enjoying that a whole lot more. So the phrase, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it the rest of your life. Jumping ship from a management career to go full-time into hypnosis, which the benefit of that is the whole wonderful theme we talk about nowadays of lifestyle design, that I'm able to craft my own schedule, really able to control my own income, and most importantly, have time with my family as a result of that.
Yeah, and you have done this. 250,000 people is amazing. I don't know that I've shook hands with 250,000 people.
Well, that was all in one day too, right? No. Which, to explain that, a lot of that is the fact of doing group presentations, one-to-one sessions, but also the fact that the world has become a lot smaller. So thanks to the reach of digital programs, whether they're single-use programs or fully fleshed out programs that people can make use of in their own home, we have an incredible ability to reach new audiences that don't physically have to be in the room with us, thanks to modern technology.
How does this work? You heard in the intro, I saw my friend up there. He was acting bizarre. I know him very well. He would not do these things. It wasn't anything inappropriate or anything like that. It was just things he wouldn't normally do. It was very uncharacteristic of him. How is it done? This guy just snapped his fingers and all of a sudden, this whole group of people on the stage that I was watching were entranced. They were doing what this presenter, this hypnotist, was talking about.
Well, let's take that example for a moment, and first a different perspective. Let's put that in the change environment. And years ago, a man came into my office where I see personal clients, and his goal is that he wants to quit smoking. And our tone in the room shifts because he suddenly goes, yeah, but you're just going to persuade me today. And I sit there and I smile and I nod and I say, yes, I'm going to persuade you to do the things you've already decided you want to do. You just haven't yet done them on your own. And he goes, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So in the environment of the process, to recognize that, granted, you'll often get different definitions of the process. In fact, I'll share two of them here. At its core, we can define hypnosis, and this reference goes back to a man by the name of Dave Ellman, who was a practitioner in the early 20th century, who had branded as that hypnosis is that bypassing of those critical elements of the conscious mind, which that's a whole lot of technical jargon. What it basically means is that automatic response in spite of conscious awareness. So easiest example, we're driving in a car thinking of everything other than driving a car, and you still end up where you'd like to go. You can be watching a movie and you know everything up there is fiction, yet we still get swept up in the movie. But take a look at these personal change conflicts we may have. Here's a moment where the executive I'm working with wants to speak confidently on stage because he knows it'll grow his business and it's already an audience of his peers. And yet part of the mind is going, shake the hands, feel nervous, stammer on your words. So which to that person I would say, professionally speaking, you're already doing hypnosis. Let's show you how to do it better. It's the mindset behind it. The other side of it too, it is let's call it this way, and hear the modifying terms in this definition. It's a mutual state of psychological influence in which hypnotic phenomenon may be possible.
Which is also a lot of big words.
I know, right? So we're basically getting that foot in the door of receptivity in the mind, opening up that gap to get in there and, like any decent infomercial, introduce the idea that there's got to be another way. And in many ways, it begins with that conscious-unconscious divide. I know I want to do this, and yet I'm feeling that. I know I can do this, and yet I feel like I'm not able to yet. So it's this process of getting all those parts of the mind in alignment. And the example briefly from the personal change aspect, or like the speaking that I do, and how that's different from like the comedy club entertainment show, it always does come back to context. You know, again, mutually psychologically influential. So the fact that here's a person in my personal space, in my office, with that public speaking goal, as opposed to here's someone I'm in a corporate environment speaking to their team where the goal is now let's motivate this team to really internalize these goals. When if I suddenly launched into some sort of comedy stage hypnosis bit, it's really cold hug the person next to you. If that context doesn't fit, those suggestions won't be accepted.
You know, this is very interesting, and I'm glad that you took us down this path for a minute because, you know, I, like probably a lot of the listeners here, when we think of hypnosis and think of, you know, some of the work that you do, my mind immediately went to the entertainment aspect of it, the show, the performance show of it. But what you do and where your expertise is and where the value you add in helping business leaders grow their businesses is that you do this more on a business coaching level where you're allowing people to tap into what they already want to do, not for entertainment value, but for success value. And so I want to take you back a little bit to when you first started down this path. And one of the things we talk about here on the podcast is this zone of genius. And if you think of like a Venn diagram, you know, the three circles that connect, and you've got your passion, you got your expertise, and then you've got something that society needs, a societal need. And where those three intersect, well, this is where our zone of genius is, and we can grow a big business. Now, a lot of people would look at what you do, and they would say, well, you're clearly passionate about it, and you're very good at it. You've done it many, hundreds of thousands of times. You're good. But where does the societal need come in? And how do you convince your clients and business people that you're working with? And maybe convince is the wrong word, but how do you create this awareness of value of your services where you have people like me that the first thought that comes to our mind is entertainment?
Great question. So it comes back to that phrase that you're already doing this. Let me show you how to do it on purpose. That over the years, the sort of origins of what I do were mostly sitting one-to-one with a client working on a personal issue. And there was a characteristic I was finding of the people I was working with that it wasn't necessarily this person coming in that everything in their life was going wrong. In most cases, it was, here's what's going great. Here's my relationships. Here's my business. But you know, it's just that one thing. And to recognize that sort of shifted the way I looked at personal change, that you'll hear this in counseling and psychological professions at times, the idea that someone's coming in with their problem and that wears you down. You have to listen to their troubles. To which my response quickly became, if that's what's happening, you are identifying with the wrong part of your client. See them as the result and then bring them to where they want to be together. So to look at every personal change process as good to great, rather than what the heck is wrong and how are we going to fix all of this. So the style of work I started to develop was one of really modeling, where did you already have the success? What abilities do you already have? And like a computer, how do we copy and paste? How do we click and drag that into the parts of your life that need that boost? So here would be the high-powered CEO who's in my office who happens to now want to quit smoking. And perhaps this way of some small personal benefit, I'd be asking just the standard question. What do you think it is that you do that makes you successful? What is it you did differently in the early days that really help you to stand out? And it's where I can now simply introduce the statement that don't let the word hypnosis scare you. The more successful the person I met, the more likely they were already doing this stuff. They were just perhaps putting a different name on it, getting in the state, getting in a mental zone, achieving peak performance. No matter what you call it, it's again back to that mindset. Let's now harness the strengths and skills you already have and bring that into this part of life where you need it. So really the entry point is the fact that here's this naturally occurring phenomenon in the mind that we can either use towards our benefit or becomes part of the challenge that we're facing. And as superhero movies are now the trending thing, let's teach you how to use those powers for good. You're already doing this. Let me show you how to do it on purpose. Becomes that mindset, that foot in the door.
Well, and I think the challenge that, you have in explaining this, and, some of us may have, like myself, in really grabbing onto this, has to do with kind of the way the media portrays this. Like I'm envisioning, the swinging clock, the pocket watch swinging, or the spiraling, whatever it may be, to snap somebody into this. Now, is that just Hollywood, or is that the way that it happens?
Well, there's a history of that methodology of what's called an eye fixation hypnotic induction, which there's something we can unpack from that and use in our business perspectives. So that was a method that they used to believe that you had to trick somebody into letting their eyelids close to begin the work, which if you think about that sequence logically, that would happen no matter what. Focus your eyes on this object in motion without blinking. They're getting very sleepy. Yeah, they're going to get fatigued no matter what. And in fact, the person I mentioned a while ago, Dave Ellman, was one of the first ones to go, hey, just close your eyes. He would go for a just simple compliance checkpoint rather than use the props and try to trick the process. But in business, I look at the theme of what I now call just get the result before you go for the result, to be ethically one step ahead in the process, that I only ever want to ask for the sale when I know I've already got it. I only ever want to make the offer for someone to, let's say, opt into a list if I'm speaking to a large group of people when I know they already want the thing that I'm offering them. So to look back to that eye fixation moment, this is something we can model from that experience, that by doing that, the eyelids would naturally close. And my whole branding of hypnosis comes back to a statement that I know how to put the right words in the right order so you can experience your own natural experience yourself. So it's the fact that I'm helping you get to that place where you're the one creating it. And yes, there is a small side benefit. I'll be one of the first ones to call it out, that because there is something, let's say, provocative and intriguing about the category of hypnosis, that often is that first foot in the door. I'd share, with the book that I've got out now, there was a moment where the first draft didn't have the word hypnosis on the cover. And someone had to kind of smack me around respectfully to go, there's 1,000 business books every month. Yours is from a hypnotist. Put it on the cover. So
you got to find your unique benefit, your unique, something that makes you stand out, which, honestly, this is why I'm so fascinated by this concept and this topic, having you on the show. I mean, you jump out to me as someone who built your business very successfully in a field that most of us don't understand, or most of us don't, maybe I don't assume. I'm looking at the guy on stage when I was a kid saying, that guy's not building $1 million brand. And here I have a $1 million brand leader on my podcast who has done just that. And so I think it's fascinating. I have one more question about this hypnosis thing before we get into kind of the book and your business more. And that is, if I'm skeptical, if I'm working with you, but maybe, I'm skeptical of it, can it still work?
Well, let's bring this into a business perspective too while we're at it, not just a statement around hypnosis, which is that if we can lead with education, if we can lead with knowledge and value, then we don't really have to spend so much time selling, because those people who then begin to integrate that knowledge and put it into use, they're naturally motivated to move forward. Now, to put that back into the context of your question around hypnosis, we've got this amazing resource in the 21st century, scholar.google.com. And to do a quick search of just the word hypnosis, suddenly pop up 280,000 peer-reviewed studies that are talking about the efficacy and the research around the process. So that amazing thing happens that we start to realize, oh, wait, it's no longer a question of belief or skepticism. Here's all the research to back it up. Here's the advances in neuroscience where they're now suggesting directly these are the regions of the brain that are now being activated because of this process. Studies going back to evolutionary psychology highlighting that this is a natural ability that people have and they can learn to do it on purpose. And it's where not until 1875 did we slap the word hypnosis on it. So there's a bit of branding, by the way. The person who called it that also tried to call it monoideism. Not a good name, so never stuck. So even we embrace that hypnosis is perhaps not the best word for it because, again, it's a thing that's already been around since there were people. I do have to credit a friend of mine down in the Austin, Texas area, a hypnotist by the name of James Hazelrig, that he was at a networking event one time, and I've now modeled this language where someone goes, I don't know if I believe in that. And his simple response was, it's okay, I believe in you.
Yeah.
But it's where, again, in business, lead with education, lead with value. I talk about the mindset of show rather than tell, rather than stand there on the platform and say, no, I'm really good at this. You should work with me. Instead, give the experience of here's a demonstration. If I have a product to sell, instead, let me teach something that's going to help them produce that small win for themselves and realize, okay, yeah, this is going to work for me. Let me get even more. So to lead with education, it comes back to, well, here's the research that backs it up. Here's where we are in the modern 21st century. And for those people ready to move forward, there's your option.
And I'm a big believer in what you just said. I love your response. And that is, I'm going to not just tell you what I do and how I do it, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to take you on a journey. And I think that is such an important part of being successful in business, particularly where you're in a one-to-one, in your case, a coaching business. So let's shift to your business a little bit. And I want to talk about, some of the things that you did that catapulted your success. So, I mean, you're very successful. How did you do it? What are some of the things that you did that catapulted that success?
So let's take the word asset and bring it out of the context of just money in the bank or property that you own. Recognize that everything you have in your business is an asset. So this could be everything from specific skills that you have, a presentation that you can do, your elevator pitch that you would do at a networking event, testimonials from past clients, media appearances that you've done. And these are all now assets that we could get that great spot in a local newspaper. In fact, back in November, I had a full-page feature in a local magazine, and it's gorgeous and it's amazing, and 0 people called as a result of it simply printing. However, I've generated about $20,000 income because of that article, because of who I facilitated that article to go in front of. So that became an asset that so many people in business would make the mistake of going, we just had this big break, let's sit around and wait for the phone call. Instead, and this is a business lesson for what it's worth that I really picked up from watching the old cartoon, The Simpsons.
Yes.
Remember Troy McClure, Phil
yes.
Hartman character? Yeah. Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You may remember me from. So it became that experience that with every opportunity to ask myself, who needs to see this? Who needs to be a part of this story? So 2 quick examples. I used to do the work that I now do in the corporate world is something that really had its origins back doing assemblies for high schools. And the key to the story was that I was already in the industry. I was not fabricating authority. I'd already worked with more than 100 schools at the point of this specific story. So I reached out to a magazine that principals receive with a simple request, with a little bit of subtle ethical influence inside of it. Hey, I work for schools, and here are 2 issues that I've been running into that I'd love to share an article to help your readers. Which of these 2 do you think would be the most effective, the most helpful for your readers? So I was clearly leaving out a third option, which was, who the heck are you and why should we publish your article? I was coming in with the authority that I already had, but now leveraging the previous experience to now build the next asset of having an article published. The article published, and as a result of that, the phone did ring. It did work in terms of organic reach. But the real result came from that leveraging game of making a couple of thousand full-color copies of that and sending that to all the schools in the geographic regions I wanted to work. Hey, you might have already seen my article. Here's an extra copy. Briefly, here's what I do. I'd love to chat with you soon. And
well, there's a couple of very interesting business points that I want to make sure that we didn't gloss over there. You didn't just passively allow some of these things to happen. So you reached out to this magazine, and one of the things that I noticed that you did is you didn't write an article, send it to them, and say, hey, would you print this? You reached out and said, these are two issues that I see. I would love to write an article on it. Which one do you think would be best? And when they determine that one, then you went through the process of putting the article together, which is kind of that minimum viable product idea that like Eric Ries talks about, the lean startup, is, you see what people want, you find the demand before you put in the work. The second thing that you did is...
Which, if you let me pause here for a second, I want to highlight something inside of that too. It's that get result before you go for the result. And it's only recently, as my wife and I have been together 15 years, we just celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary, and somehow I'd forgotten the fact that I didn't really ask her out first. Instead, one day I asked her if it would be okay if one day I asked her out, because I was chicken. So I got the stamp of approval in advance, still waited 2 weeks, and then eventually went, hey, what are you doing next Saturday? So get it. Yeah, you're right. Get the result before you go for the result. Screen the interest before you pour the time and energy into creating the asset.
And then the second thing is nobody cares about your success more than you, in that if you're just passive and allow the article to print, you may get a little bit of organic reach out of it. But what you did is you said, look, I've got this asset, or I've got this content that's been created, and now it's got a little bit of authority behind it because it's been printed in a magazine that principals read. I'm going to make my own full color copies of this and pass it out. I'm going to make sure that I get it in front of the people. I'm intentional about what I'm doing. And I think this is so important in business when a lot of the listeners here are thinking about kind of the traditional ways that they do things, whether they're real estate agents or whether they're lawyers or whether they're dentists, and they follow the herd. This is you showing that you can still do what the herd does, but then take it to the next step. Find a way to leverage the asset that you've already created. And then the final thing that you mentioned there is this idea of assets. Assets are more than just money. And one of the things that a lot of us feel like is within our businesses, we look around and we see our assets as the desk, or we see our assets as the computers. But really, those are all replaceable. And if somebody wanted to buy your business, if somebody was interested in you and your business, they don't care about the desk. They can go get a desk. Those are not the assets they care about. It's really who you are, what you've created, the intellectual properties and the ideas that you have that people want. So I love this idea, Jason. Now, our podcast is running just a bit long. And before we jump to my favorite section, which is learning from leaders, I want to ask you about this book. So you got this book that just barely came out. It's called Work Smart Business. Tell us a little bit about it.
So it became that task of recognizing that over the years I was speaking to people in my industries, people who are hypnotists, but also that spilled over to other wellness industries like massage, acupuncture, even dentist, around how do you get clients? And over the years, my executive clients were then going, wait, what are you doing over there? So that's what expanded the training to go, let's take these principles that it really came from that understanding that if I could do these things, let's go back to how we started this conversation. If I could do these things in a field where I have to convince some people I'm not going to make them bark like a dog or cluck like a chicken, chances are most entrepreneurs don't have the barriers that I had to overcome to build what I built. So in the unpacking of what really helped me to establish the business, breaking it down to 10 specific principles in terms of rethinking how we approach the business, things we've been talking about here so far. Also then sharing 10 specific strategies of better influence for ourselves and better influence ethically within others as well. So that became Work Smart Business, lessons learned from hypnotizing 250,000 people and building $1 million brand, which is going strong, getting a lot of great feedback on it, and more importantly, inspiring people to think bigger about the growth of their business.
Well, very cool. As we wrap up this episode, we'll show them a link where they can go and get that. But before we get that point, let's jump over to learning from leaders and find out a little bit of personal to go along with this business conversation we've had, and start off with, what book are you currently reading? What's on your bedside table?
I am a big fan of reading as well as rereading. So I just recently went back to Pitch Anything, Innovative Method for Presenting, Persuading, and so forth by Oren Klaff. Or Claff, I forget the exact pronunciation, but an interesting read in terms of, again, stacking an offer, presenting an idea in such a way that by the time we actually ask for the sale, the person has already made that decision.
Now, have you read Persuasion by Robert Cialdini?
Absolutely. Yeah. I talk about Cialdini's, both of his books, I believe, actually in mine. The whole mindset of, again, reciprocity and the whole the sort of pre-framing of things is massive.
Yeah. Okay. And comparing the two books, which one do you prefer?
I'd say, in chances that they may be listening, I enjoy merits of both books. How's that for a nice political answer?
I'm sure they both are listening right now.
Right. Though they should, let's be honest. So for your benefit too. So to look at, I say go back to the Cialdini books at times, because it's where the number of examples, as well as just breaking it down to the specifics, that this is a big premise that I live by, is that it's not the platform, it's the strategy. So to look at the how and the why of the business rather than, oh, no, you click here on Facebook. So we can get caught up in the technical jargon of everything. But if you understand the psychology of the process, and that's something that Cialdini lays out beautifully in both of his books, if you understand the psychology, whatever the next big marketing platform is 50 years from now, you'll be ready for it.
Very cool. And thank you for diving into that. Next question. And we already talked a little bit about the superhero fascination. And now we're going to talk about superpowers. What is your leadership superpower?
This comes back to a quote from a friend of mine where we're at dinner and he goes, I was explaining you to my wife. Which there's a lot inside of that sentence, in asking further questions, realizing it's that ability of intent. That there's an ability that I've really harnessed over the years that if I decide I'm going to do something, I'm going to make it happen. And I brand this in the book as hypnotic tenacity, this mindset of going, okay, so I've decided I'm going to make this thing happen. What are all the resources that need to be in place to create the massive action necessary to get that opportunity? So this goes back to the action of just simply writing and publishing a book. It goes back to how I got a TED Talk in April of 2018. So to look at whatever that thing is you want to do, to go all in on that strategy and make sure every step along the way has intent behind it. Because if we're just kind of doing it for the sake of doing it, the results are going to be watered down. Work with purpose, work with focus, work with intent. That's that work smart mindset.
And to the listeners, you just unpacked how we can all develop this superpower within ourselves. It's so important. I love the word intentionality. That's one of my most favorite words. I use it all the time. And I love how you unpacked that and showed us some steps that we can take to become more intentional in our decision-making, in our actions, in the way that we proceed. So awesome. Thank you for that. The next question, please share a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra, something that you live by.
So this is a quote that's heavily shared in the book, and proud to say I got a blurb on the back of the cover by the person saying it. If you're not creating, you're waiting. And that actually goes to the actor, comedian, and also podcaster Kevin Pollak. That I heard him say that at one point, to look at what he did in his own career in terms of moving out of that category of being character actor and comedian and impersonator to then launching a full media brand, really creating the renaissance of his own career and using that to now leverage to much bigger things. And, sending a chapter of the book over to him, getting a nice blurb in the back cover of the book. But yeah, that phrase, if you're not creating, you're waiting. So these days that if you're sitting around going, why is the phone not ringing? Why are people not buying this product? It kind of becomes that catalyst to go, well, what else can I do to drive traffic to this thing?
Such a great story. And another takeaway that I had from what you just said is it's always no until you ask. I mean, you wanted a nice book cover, nice book quote. You got it, but you only got it by asking and by reaching out and by being proactive. And congratulations on that. That's incredible. Final question for us then is the book that you most often gift to friends, family, or colleagues.
So there's a disclaimer to this that I really enjoy the book, but I share it because I actually disagree with one of its primary points. though I still love it, and that's why I gift it. It's a book by Cal Newport, So Good They Can't Ignore You, which the title of the book goes back to a quote from Steve Martin, which that in many ways was his premise in terms of becoming one of the first real superstars in comedy, of just be so good they can't ignore you, that becoming the methodology. Though the book is a balance between, is it the skills that we build that creates our success, or is it the passion that is fueling it? And he shares some really interesting thoughts about one of these chicken or the egg type conversations, that the passion is not the key, that why skills trump passion is the subtitle of the book. And I appreciate that because, again, put in the work necessary, but at the same time, it's got to be a balance, because the passion has to be that initial spark. Otherwise, we're not going to put in the 10, 20, 30,000 hours to really become the expert at what we do. So I love sharing it because there's a phrase that a friend of mine by the name of Scott Sandlin says, of just learn from people who disagree with each other. That I have massive respect for the book and the research that he did, yet to introduce it to people to go, which one do you need more of, skills or passion? Because now we can turn up the power on either one or both over time. And that's why I love gifting that book.
Well, it goes back to how we talked earlier, the zone of genius, right? And I would agree with you that your zone of genius, when you're operating at your highest and best efficiency and productivity, happens when your passion, your expertise, and a societal need all come in contact with each other. It's not that expertise or skill is better or trumps passion, but they're both key components to you operating within your zone of genius. But the last thing you said, I think, is the most important thing you said, and that is the importance of learning from people who disagree with you. There are lessons to be learned everywhere. And this podcast is an example of, I started off thinking that we were going to talk about entertainment. I thought we were going to go down the path of being a stage performer, and we ended up being business discussion and importance of, really operating within your zone of genius. I really appreciate, Jason, you coming on the show. Before we let you go, how can we find out more about you? And of course, pick up a copy of this great book.
Yeah, absolutely. So my personal business website is jasonlinett.com, and I'll spell the last name because people try to add extra letters. It's only 6 letters, Linett. So jasonlinett.com. I'm on all the social media platforms as well as Jason Linett. And I'll share a freebie with your audience here too. I've put together something called the Positive Influence Power Pack, which that includes actually 2 chapters of the book. One is called Power of Premise. It's all about how do you become more influential in your own thinking toward yourself. And then there's also a linguistic strategy that I share in the book that's actually a method of ethical influence with others, which you can find the details about the book from the same link. And we'll do a special one for your audience. It's going to be worksmartbusiness.com/ML. So ML as in modern leadership. Worksmartbusiness.com/ML. That'll give you those 2 freebies and tell you all about the book as well.
Well, we need to go over and do that, Jason. I mean, this has been an incredible conversation, but we didn't even crack the cover of the book. We talked about the title. We talked about the back book jacket quote, but we didn't really get into all the valuable, powerful lessons that you teach in there. So we need to go and get this. I'm going to link it all up on the show notes. Thank you for coming on the show this week and being this week's Modern Leadership guest expert.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
All right, my friends, what did you think of that? Bringing on a hypnotist onto the show. And this conversation went in a completely different direction that I assumed that it would. I come onto these episodes prepared to ask questions and to go in certain directions. And I really honestly thought that this conversation was going to be more about public speaking, about stage presence, about performance. And we really dove into these business principles. And, alas, we didn't get into the book very much. And after we hit stop on the recording, I told Jason, I said, I got to get a copy of this book. We got to have you back on the show to really just go through the principles in this book. He's a great storyteller. We had so much fun diving into kind of his background and the way that he has built his business, tremendously successful business, and just fascinating concepts. If you go back and listen, Zone of Genius, assets are more than finances, and learning from people that you disagree with are some of the key teachings that jumped out to me this episode. And of course, everything that we talked about on this episode can be found on the show notes, jakeacarlson.com/ML111. for episode 111. ML111 will get you right to all the goodness that we have from this episode. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life, and of course, stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.